Hi, everyone. We'll give it another minute or two, and then we'll get our program started in just a minute. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kristen Tulo, and I am honored to be the Pennsylvania State Director representing Humane World for Animals, which is formerly the Humane Society of the United States. So we have a new name and a new updated look, but we have the same powerful mission to end animal cruelty. And in my organizational role, my commitment to Pennsylvania is to protect animals through strong community coalitions and impactful legislation, just like we are doing today. So welcome to the virtual Pennsylvania's Pet Protection Orders, a new tool to protect families and pets training, in partnership with Crisis Center North and the Keystone Link Coalition, which is a statewide coalition of individuals and organizations dedicated to being on the lookout for and prevention of intersecting violence against humans and animals. On the next slide, our goal today is to provide early awareness and tangible steps for dealing with family violence to take support for family members and their beloved companion animals. On the next slide, check the slides here. We are fortunate to have a stellar lineup of speakers for today. Grace Coleman and Dana Friday of Crisis Center North and Melissa Hemming of Westmoreland County Bureau, Children's Bureau. And on a personal note, they were instrumental in advocating for Pennsylvania to become the 40th state that includes pets in protection from abuse orders. And I'd also like to acknowledge our bill sponsors, state representatives Christina Sappi and Natalie Mihalik, who championed in a bipartisan way the need to give our state the much needed tools to help survivors and their families, including their pets, escape abuse together. And next up for our speakers, Representative Sappi and Representative Mihalik.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It's great to be with you this afternoon. It's afternoon now. We've been talking about this for so long. So um, I'm thrilled that we finally got this done. I know so many organizations have been working for years on this issue. And I remember as a staff person in the state Senate, this issue coming up in the office that I was working in. And the intersection of domestic violence and animal abuse is not new. And a lot of the organizations that helped us get this done understood that. And it's a real testament to the power of working together, which is why I'm so thrilled to have worked with Rep. Natalie Mihalik across the aisle on this for not one term, but two, to get this done. But I think you're going to hear today a lot about how this legislation, really helps families. It helps, obviously, it protects animals. Most abuse victims do not leave the environment if they are not assured a safe place for their animal. And in that, with that thought, we know that animals, are a way to get to a victim. We know that they're a way to, completely to continue that cycle of torment and abuse. And children are in that environment very often. And so that's one of the things that, was so important to me, I know, to get this done. So I'm tremendously grateful again to the army of people that we had behind us in getting this done. It took a lot. It was a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of travel time for all of the advocates that are here today joining us, traveling to the Capitol, meeting with senators and House members in both parties. This vote came down to the very last day of the legislative term last year. So we really were biting our nails and not sure whether it was going to work or not. So when it passed in the Senate on the very last day of session, it was a real victory. So I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you have a lot of great content here, but I just want to again, thank my colleague, Rep. Natalie Mihalek, for joining me in this effort and for bringing her expertise and her amazing, strong background to help get this over the finish line.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. It was a tremendous opportunity to work with you and to work with many of the advocates, especially Kristen Trullo. And thank you, Kristen, for putting this together, because us passing the legislation was really only one piece of the puzzle. And it's what we do with the legislation, implementing it and making sure that all those parties involved when it comes to a PFA, that they are all aware that this is now law. I think that's the even more important piece is the implementation. So calls like this and getting these advocates together, I think, is just crucial to, seeing this succeed in the way that we intended. We know this is a huge barrier for victims to come forward, as my dogs are growling in the background here. It's the one call I would allow them to be present for. As I know there's a lot of animal advocates on the call today, but we can't thank you enough for doing what you do day in and day out. And same to the domestic violence advocates on the call as well. This is the intersection of sort of both of those worlds. And it really was the perfect union of these advocates coming together, being able to work with Rep. Sappi across the aisle and getting this done, even though it came down to the wire. I think it provides a good example on how we can actually get things done in the legislature with the way that it is right now. So this was, like I said, like Christine said, almost 4 years that it took us to get this across the finish line. So now we're handing it off to you, and we know it's in good hands, and we're excited for everyone to attend this webinar today and get into the details and really how this is going to work in the future. So thank you.
Thank you both so much. And I just was saying, I wish there was a heart emoji for webinars. Thank you so much for your kindness and your comments and for everything that you all did to get this bill across the finish line. And if we go to the next slide, I was going to share the story. While this is not specific to domestic violence, many people are aware of the story of Mary Ellen Wilson, who was the victim of the first widely recognized child abuse case. The next slide is that. Can we go to the next slide? And she was abused and neglected, but authorities could not help because no laws yet existed in our country for the protection of children. So on the next slide, ironically, animal abuse laws did exist. So officials turned to the ASPCA, and Henry Berg, the founder of the society, argued Mary Ellen was a member of the animal kingdom and needed protection from the state. Within 48 hours, a successful investigation was launched, and shortly after, Berg went on to help establish the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. The reason I share this story is that it's quite compelling and illustrates that even at that time in the 1800s, people understood these issues between animal and human maltreatment is highly correlated. So on the next slide, as we move forward to 2016, the FBI started tracking animal cruelty cases in their own category. So prior to that, 2016, they were lumped into a other category, and now they're broken into 4 areas. So first, animal neglect; second, intentional abuse and torture; third, animal sexual assault; and fourth, organized abuse like dog and rooster fighting. So as we're moving forward and states are becoming fully implemented in this reporting system, it is an additional tool for us to help protect victims from abuse. So as we go to the next slide, in 2016, we did receive approval from AOPC, which is Pennsylvania's court system, to present to the minor judiciary. The lens for this training was to all 555 magisterial district judges, and it was on the link between animal abuse, child abuse, and domestic violence. Also, in 2017, the chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics and Emergency Services for Children's programs had us offer a training to EMS across the state as well. So I bring this up to showcase how over these years, animal and human related organizations have been partnering together. Humane Society police officers, animal control officers, state and local police agencies, and legal authorities, because they all wisely recognize the link between these issues. So that is so instrumental in how we were able to pass the most significant strengthening of the animal cruelty statute in our state history in 2017. So on the next slide, we advocated for this bill, and this is a photo of that's important. The story is important because it demonstrates the need to take animal cruelty cases seriously. You know, Representative Sappi and Representative Mihalik mentioned earlier that pets are a part of our family and they can become a victim of violence. And many times victims may stay in an abusive home out of concern for their pets, or the abuser will terrorize their victim. And this is that exact case. So this is pictured here is Biscuit, and he was the victim of a domestic violence dispute. The perpetrator broke his jaw and put 14 cigarettes out across his body. This was such a horrifying case that the director of the Anna Shelter in Erie, Pennsylvania, took Biscuit in, where he is now living his best life. But this is a heartbreaking example that demonstrates the link between animal abuse and domestic violence. And while Libre's law increased penalties for egregious acts of cruelty, and in cases like Biscuit, where there is serious bodily injury or death, felony charges could be filed, policy and practice towards promoting prevention and interventions to break the cycle of abuse and prevent this before it even happens is what led to the passage of Act 146, which aims to assist victims in escaping these kinds of situations with their entire family, including their cherished pets. So on the next slide, as we move forward to 2020, we all know that this was the when COVID hit. And there were calls, be it domestic violence, child abuse, or animal abuse, which was becoming an emergency issue, an emerging issue. And Kathy Palm with the Center for Children's Justice and I came together to talk about, you know, how can we ensure family safety and have some way for families to reach out when so many were isolated due to COVID-19 mitigation strategies. So while we're brainstorming through who might be going into homes and seeing things that led to a discussion about humane officers and animal control officers, you know, who did have access to homes, 2 months later, we had an ad hoc group called the Keystone Link Coalition. And we pulled together a virtual training that attracted over 500 participants. And we quickly realized that this wasn't a one and done moment of collaboration. So in 2020, I actually have a hard time even talking about this story. But the editorial on the next slide references the murder of 2-year-old Mikkel Fetterman, who lived in Western Pennsylvania with a puppy who had their leg amputated due to the abuse. And the abuse of the puppy before his sexual assault and murder have led many to ask the question, what might have changed had authorities been called out for the abused puppy? Still, there's no restoring Mikkel's childhood or life. We can honor him by doing public awareness and education events, engagement events in your local communities. We can continue having education and training on a state level like we're doing today. And again, focusing on policy and practices that lead to the passage of bills like Act 146. And then we do have, I think that you were going to hop on, Melissa, and share a little bit about this story as well. So if you're on and want to pop on, Melissa. Okay, she might end up sharing a little more about that when she has her part of the presentation. So we can move to the next slide. So those were the 3 points that the Keystone Link, what we just covered, that our goals and mission are public awareness and engagement, education and training, and policy and practice towards preventing and breaking the cycles of abuse. So if we go to the next slide, this is, I have to mention, this is Ari, the super pup who aids survivors in court through Crisis Center North's Pause for Empowerment program. And he pushed for their protection under House Bill 1210. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to that photo and all of the advocates that stood with the representatives and who championed this bill. And I think the most loved canine lobbyist at the Capitol was Ari by far. So as we close with resources, we have a fantastic Act 146 overview that Dana will really cover in detail. So it is a great tool for you to utilize. Second, we have all heard the adage, if you see something, say something. We know that it starts with people who care deeply about this issue. So these are your contacts for domestic violence, contacting the National Helpline; for child abuse, contacting the Pennsylvania Child Abuse Reporting Hotline; and then for animal cruelty, you can look up by your county your Humane Society police officer. And if you are in a county without a humane officer, you would contact local or state law enforcement. And then finally, I do want to just really say your legislators want to hear from you. They represent the issues that are important to you. And so having that ongoing relationship with them, having and collaborating with partners in your community, like-minded organizations, and having those relationships ahead of when you need them. So when you're in a situation and you need to place a pet and you need resources, or you might need to talk to your state representative about a gap in the law. These are all important relationships to have. So I think in closing, while we advocate for continued enhanced protection, I know on this call, we all know we have a responsibility to keep people and animals safe. And thank you so much for being on and for collaborating with partners in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. My name is Grace Coleman, and I am the president and CEO of Crisis Center North. I would like to pause for just one moment today and share with you some information about our sponsors. So Crisis Center North had received a grant from the Office of Justice Programs at the U.S. Department of Justice, and they are the individuals who are assisting us with this grant funding today. So thank you so much for that. And so again, I just wanted to reinforce some of the materials that Kristen brought up to all of you today. And part of that is that the Keystone Link is an interdisciplinary coalition with 3 main goals. And those goals are education, engagement, and advocacy. It's so important that we make Pennsylvanians aware of the link between human and animal abuse, and that we also take that information and package it into trainings to help people be able to utilize that information. Also, we do advocacy work, as Kristen has mentioned today, with the recent passage of the PPO in order to help further aid in breaking the cycle of violence. A quick nod to the founders of the Keystone Link that include Kathleen Palm from the Center for Children's Justice and Kristen Tulo, who you just heard from at the Pennsylvania State Director of Humane World for Animals. These individuals started this in about 2019, and we are proudly chaired this year by Nancy Blaney, who's the Director of Government Affairs at the Animal Welfare Institute, and Teresa Olson, who is the Program Director of Suspected Child Abuse and Neglect, PA chapter at the American Academy of Pediatrics. So we thank all of those individuals for the ongoing leadership and tenacity that they provide as we attempt to further advance our mission. The founding members of the Keystone Link are illustrated on this slide. As you can see, there were a number of organizations that came together to address this a number of years ago, and hopefully we will continue to grow. So you can see on the left-hand side our membership, which includes individuals from across the nation as well as the state. And we are hoping that today we can inspire you to consider joining the Keystone Link to help us even further with the individual talents that you bring to this particular issue. My job today was to provide a framework for this workshop and to tell you why the link is so important. It's very important because there was a survey done by the Pew Research Center that indicated 97% of American pet owners consider their pet to be a part of their family. Throughout the generations, there's an evolving sort of concept about how we incorporate pets and how we see them. And clearly, corporate America will tell you that since most families now are giving pets birthday gifts, we definitely consider them a part of our family. So 51% of individuals on the research study indicated they were as much a part of their family as any human member. But probably more shockingly, 97% of the respondents reported that keeping their pet was an important factor in seeking shelter. And almost half wouldn't consider going to shelter if it meant leaving a pet. I know at Crisis Center North, Dana and the other advocates that are here see this on a regular and consistent basis. So having tools to address this issue became very important. 91% of respondents reported that their pets' emotional support and the physical protection that they provided were significant in their ability to survive and to heal. And 48% reported a concern that their partner would harm or kill their pets. A shockingly 37% reported that their partner had already threatened to harm or kill the pets. And finally, 29% reported that their partner had already harmed or killed a pet. Now, I know statistics can be long and sometimes for many boring, but when you take a look at that survey that was conducted by the National Domestic Violence Hotline Survey, then you can see why it's so important that the domestic violence programs provide a response, because having pets and not having proper resources for those pets is a significant obstacle and barrier to getting humans out of violent situations. So as you can see, animal cruelty, abuse, and neglect are often the seminal warning signs and the first link in the chain of family violence. I like to think of it as the canary in the coal mine from long ago. When you see that a pet is being harmed in a family, it won't be long before you see human members being harmed as well. So when intervention in animal abuse occurs, not only is the pet saved, but the family is saved. And that's why we think an interdisciplinary approach to this problem is so very important, because it's going to take all of us to provide the necessary solutions to ensure that everyone in a family is safe. As Kristen shared, we are now one of 40 states that includes pets in protection from abuse orders. And we're hoping that all of you as advocates now have the tools that you need to help survivors and their families in escaping abuse. And with that information, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce you to Dana Friday. Dana Friday is the Program Director of Legal Services and the Pause for Empowerment programs at Crisis Center North in Pittsburgh, PA, a nonprofit counseling and resource center that provides services to victims of domestic violence. Dana attended Boston College for her BA in political science and psychology and the University of Pittsburgh School of Law for her JD. She had worked as a litigating attorney in the civil court and then owned a commercial equestrian facility with 45 horses, hosting numerous events like boarding camps, riding lessons, and clinics. She is combining these two disciplines together in working in criminal and family court with her partner, the canine court advocate previously mentioned, a dog named Ari. She collaborates with animals and legal-based organizations to educate on the link between domestic violence and abuse and to keep domestic violence victims and their companion animals together when fleeing abusive situations. Dana feels appreciative of working at Crisis Center North, and she deeply enjoys helping families, all members of the families, to be safe and to stay together during crisis. So with that, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Dana, who will probably have a very fascinating presentation for you on what she sees in the field. Dana?
Thank you so much, Grace. I'm so excited to be here. And so I feel very privileged to be sharing time with you guys and to go over this new law. As you guys know, we've heard some great information about the, I don't know if you guys can see my screen. And we're talking about the changes to the Domestic Relations Act, which is including the companion animals in the Protection from Abuse Order. So I want to talk about this new law that came out and some great information that we had heard from Grace to add on to that. Why is this so important? This is extremely important to all of our clients, to survivors of domestic violence, to their families. And just to put some more information on, some more for you guys to know, is that pet ownership has spiked in the United States over the last few decades. About 66% of American households have at least one pet. And as Grace said, 97% of those families do believe that they consider that animal to be part of the family. So our attitudes towards our pets has also changed. A recent Pew Research Center study found that 97% of pet owners, again, consider to be part of the family, and about half of those owners saying that the pets are as much as part of their family as a human member. People throw their pets' birthday parties, they purchase pet insurance, they cook homemade meals for their pets. So they really consider their pets to be part of that family. And so also pets are so important to the family, especially in these situations, because they assist in the healing of domestic violence victims. They promote health and they also promote healthy lifestyles. Our attitudes in general has changed in the United States. All 50 states, the District of Columbia and the US territories, and the federal government criminalize animal cruelty, which also involves bans on physical abuse, neglect, and abandonment. Domestic violence, child abuse, and animal abuse frequently occur together in a family. In the national survey, 85% of domestic violence shelters indicate that women coming to the facilities told of incidents of pet abuse. So women with pets may delay leaving a dangerous environment for fear of their pet's safety. In a domestic violence center situation, there's a crisis bond that often occurs between the pet and the victim. They are going through the same thing together. The only other being that really understands what is going on, along with the victim, is that pet for comfort. Also, for the example of leaving, they don't want to leave their pets and escape the violence. Why? It's similar in Pennsylvania. In Western Pennsylvania, we do have floods here. So it's similar to when a boat pulls up to a home that is flooded and says, hey, come on, get in. We're going to save you. If the person says, well, can you take my pet? If they say no, and many times they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave that pet for the fear of the pet dying. They don't want to have the guilt. They love that pet. That is part of their family. This is an example of how they feel in a situation of abuse. And so they don't want to leave them. So we're here to discuss and educate on this barrier, how to remove that barrier. And the Pennsylvania legislature has also recognized that barrier and now has acted to change it. Even the American Bar Association has issued resolutions that urge all governments to adopt appropriate principles and civil legal protections to meet the needs of people with pets in family law and civil restraining order proceedings. Where will this also go? We are going to need funds to effectuate these changes. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end, as well as Melissa has some things to talk about that also. So we all know what is domestic violence. We are familiar with it. We're here. And what is the most important part of domestic violence? Well, it is the power and control, for you to know. It is a person who wants to have power and control over another person. How are they going to do that? This is the Duluth Power and Control Wheel of domestic violence. What this is this is a diagram that shows how a person can be controlled and have power over another person. Generally, in domestic violence, we think of physical violence, we think of sexual violence, but there's a lot more to it. As you can see from this wheel, there is coercion, economic abuse, children, using male privilege, isolation. And it's really important for all of us in social services to understand this, because this is the core part of how they are controlling another person. And it's not only the physical violence. As you can see, this wheel has now been modified to include pets. And it's the same kind of thing. That is why it's really important for this, this law to be passed, as well as other laws in every other state, well, 40 other states. And also the federal government has also recognized this. What we're going to do is look at a lot of these and talk about how the abuser will use isolation, will use threats, legal abuse, denying and blaming. They will use children, and they will use intimidation and economic abuse by using the pet. Some of these examples are intimidation. They will harm or kill a pet and that say, I'm going to do this to you if you don't comply with the abuser's demands. This was not recognized as clearly as it is now through this law in Pennsylvania. But that is, we see this in court a lot. There are multiple times where we have been in court and somebody has said to us, yeah, well, they were angry with me. They took one of our dogs out to go to the bathroom, and suddenly the dog died. It's scary. It is very scary to someone. They don't want to mess with someone that is going to be hurting their animal. There's emotional abuse. Just by calling an animal that they love a name, or putting that animal down, or saying they're going to take that animal away, that unconditional love that you get from that animal is a way that they will control a victim. They will isolate it, refusing a person to take the pet to the vet, not allowing the person to socialize with other animals, take their dog to the dog park or have other relationships, because they want to have that control over the person. We have seen this multiple times. There was a client that had a bird. The bird was, when a bird gets upset, it picks its feathers off. The abuser would not allow that person to take the bird. And it was very distressing to that victim. They'll use the children, horrible stories, telling if the animal disappears, it was mom's fault. Mom took your animal away. Mom didn't listen. There's even more horrible stories about children not eating, and then the abuser wants them to, so they won't feed the pet unless that child eats. Things like that, that are just that they use the animal to control the rest of the family. Economic abuse, not allowing people to have money on the animal that they love. If that animal becomes severely neglected, they will use that along with the legal abuse as calling animal control and saying that it is your fault. Coercion and threats, I will kill your animal. And also denying or blaming. Basically, I had to kick our dog because you did not listen to me. You made me angry. It's a gaslighting way that they will try to intimidate or control a person because being cruel to something that they love. And then again, the legal abuse, which is, okay, I am not, I'm going to take the animal away. You go ahead and leave, but you're never going to see your dog or cat or whatever other animal it is that you love again. So what has happened? This is one law that has been really great. We had a client in a hospital who had been beaten up. And that client was, in the hospital room, got a FaceTime from their abuser. The abuser said, you better not be calling the police. You better get home. Had their dog strangling with the hands around the dog's neck, saying that your dog's going to die if you don't. And so what did that victim do? That victim went home because there was no other recourse. They couldn't call animal control. The animal didn't show any problems at the time. For something to happen, it would have taken months and months for something to happen. We of course didn't want somebody to go to the home to try to take the dog. So there was really, the victim decided that the best thing that they could do to save their family, the dog, was to go home. So now the legislature has passed this new law, which gives our victims, our survivors, an opportunity, a tool to be able to be in an emergency crisis situation, take that pet with them without legal problems, anything happening to that person, and be able to leave that situation and feel safe for that animal. So we have this law. We're going to go over this specifically and talk about this law. So what does this law say? It's confusing, right? So all law is confusing. But what it says is under the domestic relations, which is where we have the protection from abuse orders, or our laws and protection from abuse are in the domestic relations section of Pennsylvania law. It's called abuse of the family. Under section 6018 is relief. They have now added a section for relief that you can, a judge can grant temporary ownership rights over a companion animal and direct the defendant to refrain from possessing, contacting, attempting to contact, transferring, or relocating the companion animal, or contacting or entering the property of any person sheltering the companion animal, right? Okay, so this is extremely confusing. So we are going to break this down. Let's really look at what they're asking here. What does this mean? Why is this important? What questions do we need to ask our clients? How are we going to get this relief to these people? We are here, at least in a domestic violence center, is to have safety planning. We are here to help our clients find safety. Okay, that is our number one priority. We want them to be able to be safe because they are not safe in their homes. They are not safe and they're afraid to leave. They are, all of those things that we talked about are a way to control them to stay there, to do as they are told. So how are we going to do that? So how do the animals fit in that? Because that's why we're here today to talk about the animals, right? So we're not exactly sure how a lot of these things are going to play out, right? We don't know what the courts are going to do with it, but we have an idea of what they have put in there. So we are going to talk about it today. So obviously, safety is our most important thing. We want to make sure that their family is safe. We want them to stay together as a family. We ask the first question to all of our clients come in, and Melissa's going to talk about this also. All of our clients that come into our center, we ask them, do you have a pet? Why is this question so important? I'll tell you why. Because no victim or survivor thinks about this. They don't, unless they see that these things are happening in their families, but they don't recognize a lot of the time that the power and control this person is having over here. So what's happening is that we really want to ask them this question for a lot of reasons, okay? First off is the obvious one. We're planning for safety. We want everybody to be safe. When they say they have a pet, has your pet been abused? Does the person do anything to your pet? They're surprised that you're asking these questions. But we want to make sure that they and their family are safe. It also helps them to determine certain finances that they're going to have to deal with when they leave, if they're going to take their animal with them. And also that advocate relationship between an advocate and a survivor is very important. I have been in court multiple times where somebody has said, I've asked you have a pet. They don't know why I'm asking. But then when they find out why we're asking and that we are here to help them and their pet, I have had them cry. I have handed a pet card to a person in the PFA court, getting a temporary PFA multiple times, and they have cried, being so thankful that somebody really is listening to them and that cares about them. Of course, the children are priority, but the people don't understand that are older or don't have children, how important this is. And they are just very, very grateful. And it also opens a lot of doors for communication between us. In Pennsylvania, as everyone probably knows, animals are thought of as property. So that is why it's really interesting and great that this law is coming about. Because when you have something that's property, they were looked at like a toaster. But now the legislature and all kinds of government organizations are starting to recognize that we really love our toaster, that we love it, and it makes us act in different ways. And that is why they're taking recognition of this. So why is the first part, temporary ownership rights? Why is that important? Because as it is a property, who owns this animal, right? And it's one of the ways that our abusers are using to control people by saying, I'm the owner, you're not taking it, we bought it together. But when you're going for a temporary PFA and this is an emergency crisis situation, you are leaving. When you go to the court, they will grant you ownership rights without giving them the microchip information, without giving them all the vet records. That'll be determined later on, maybe at the final PFA, maybe even not then, maybe even later. But at that point, it gives you an emergency route to saving your animal and getting out of this situation. So it's really important that we understand that our clients understand that they can go and get this right away. So, and the legislature has recognized it. It also says that the defendant must refrain from possessing the animal. Why is that important? That is important because sometimes the victim doesn't have the animal. Okay. Perhaps the person left and they wanted to leave, but they didn't take the animal. They already put the animal with a friend or they put the animal in a shelter. That defendant cannot go and possess the animal. So that is another way that that they are protected. They're also, the defendant must refrain from contacting the animal. What does that mean? Well, that means they can't even approach the animal. So so we have had a case, there was a case that we had where there was a person and they had left to go to work. Well, the dog walker was taking the animal for a walk and the abuser saw the animals on the road. And guess what? Went up to the animals. They approached the animals, actually took the animals and left the state, and put them somewhere else and continuously threatened, which there's multiple stories of that, but they're not even allowed to contact the animal. If they see the animal on the street, they're not allowed to go see the animal. If the victim is walking the animal, they can't contact the animal. So right there, that would be a violation of the PFA. In Pennsylvania, a PFA can be granted for bodily injury or fear of bodily injury. So what's happened? Those are the only ways. Now, fear of bodily, so we know what bodily injury is, right? We know, that's our normal situation of what we think of abuse, getting hit or in some manner of physical injury. But what is fear of bodily injury? And that's where this law really comes in, because can be a series of of behavior that a abuser is doing. But it can't be, for instance, if there was a family member, because you can get a PFA for family members. It doesn't have to be a boyfriend, girlfriend. Let's just say that you don't get along with your mother and you never have, and you told her to leave you alone, and she comes to your house to see you, and she calls you all the time, and she won't stop bothering you, and you've changed your number, and she still bothers you, and she calls all your friends. You can't get a PFA unless you have a fear of bodily harm. So these things that we're asking our clients are really important because they must show that the way that this person is behaving towards our animal is making us afraid that those are the kind of things that they're going to do to us and cause bodily injury to us. Okay, so that's why a lot of these are up here. It's not about just being harassed without some type of fear, but the things that people do when they yell and scream at you and they come 2 inches from your face, or they're giant and you're tiny. These are important things for us to think about. So let's look at some more of these things that are in our law. When we ask for the defendant is to refrain from attempting to contact the animal. So let's say that the animal is in another person's possession, right? And they want to find that animal. They may be trying to find the animal on social media. They may be going on Facebook. They may be asking people, attempting to find that animal. That is a violation of the order. If this is ordered, this is a violation of that order. And so it's important for our clients to keep information about these things that they find out. They're refrained from transferring the animal. This is a situation where maybe they both do own the animal. Maybe they bought the animal together. So what's going to happen? Fine, you're going to go get a PFA against me. You're going to do something when I told you not to do it. I'm going to go sell that animal. I'm going to take my papers that I took from our house, and I am going to transfer that animal that you love to someone, and you're never going to see it again. Now this law is taking it and saying, no, if you do that, that's a violation of this order, and you can be arrested for it. And also it shows how it would be illegal. It's another way of preventing this abuse. Refrain from relocating the animal. We've had cases where a horse, the person went to the barn and had been there multiple times. So they knew him, drove up in his trailer, took the animal, and left the state. The animal cannot be relocated. So even a lot of these things, when the animal cannot be with our survivors physically, it is a way of preventing this person from intimidating and controlling this person by taking what they love and taking it somewhere else. So now they can put that in the order also, that even if a lot of them, it might not be, going to the person's house and ripping it out of their hands. But a lot of animals we can't keep with us, or wherever our clients or survivors have to go for safety. It's possible that they cannot take the animal with them. So the animal has to go somewhere else. It could go to a friend, a family, it could go to a boarding facility. So it's important that any order that is given to all of those places also. Also, they're refraining from contacting the property of any person sheltering the animal. They can't call that person. They can't say to them, this is what I want to happen. This is what I want to know. How is the animal? What's happening? Because then you know what that does? That person calls our clients or our survivors and says, oh, I just want you to know this person is calling, this abuser is calling about the animal. And what does that do? It scares you. It scares them. Okay, they are afraid. It's another form of controlling them. And of course, that they are refrained from entering the property of the person sheltering the animal. As anything, as we talk about them, they have no privilege to enter the property of a lot of places with a PFA, but now they have no privilege to be present on this property. And the legislatures recognize this. What other kind of sections of this, of the PFA Act help us? So these are ones that have already existed, and there are ones like eviction. So this is important for us to talk to our clients about safety planning. Okay, we're going to stay at home with the pet. What do we need to stay at home with the pet? This person has been evicted, so they can't come onto the property anymore. But questions, what do we really need to know from our clients to make sure that while they're in the home with that pet, it's important. For instance, do we let the pet out the back door? Does it have a fence around it usually? Does it not? Is there a lock on that fence? Things like that. Also, there are, does the pet accompany the person to the places like employment? Does the pet accompany these persons into the daycare? And then, of course, firearms extremely important because, as we know, already the PFA Act had said that if they had threatened to kill or killed a pet, that you can get a PFA. It didn't protect any other pets, but it was an automatic removal of firearms too federally. So let's look at final orders. The one in Pennsylvania, which how it works is there's 3 different kinds of protection from abuse orders. The first one's called an emergency protection from abuse order that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. That is one that you have to you get from basically a magistrate judge. It lasts either 24 hours or until the next time that the court's open. And so that is a quick one. Then we have the temporary PFA, which is the one where you can go in and get about a 10-day, 7 to 10-day order. And then there's a final PFA order, which can last up to 3 years. At that final, it's important. These are important though, because the first 2 are the times when you're escaping the violence from the home. That is why this is important, taking the animal with us. Important. This final order is important also though. So the court, they sort of did something strange, which I don't know what they're going to do with it. And I think it'll be interesting for us all to watch it. They only put the companion animal part in part 2 of this order. The first part talks about a final order. What happens is when you go to get a final order, when you talk to your clients, you can make an agreement with the other party. That is just like a consent agreement. It's not signed by the judge. It's just like any agreement that you would make anywhere. And in order to enforce that agreement, you have to go either file a contempt order or you have to file another PFA or whatever. It's not enforceable by law departments, law enforcement, by police departments. So there's also, you can have a final agreement that the judge signs. That's another option. And then finally, if you can't come to any agreement, then you will have a hearing and a final order will be issued by the judge. So this, interestingly, is only in the final agreement part. And I don't know why, but it is there. So we will see how that plays out. But right now it says that the final order, again, can last up to 3 years or the final agreement. So it can be a protection for that time. Extension orders. Also, this is important because they had added the companion animal to this. You can see what it says. But if basically during the time of the protection from abuse order, the perpetrator or the defendant, I should say a defendant because it's civil, the defendant will then has done something again. So there's either more acts of abuse or they were engaged in a pattern or practice that indicates continued risk of harm, and there is a hearing, then also they can extend that order. So they added companion animal here. So a question that keeps coming up is what kind of animals are protected? So they did modify the definitions. Really interestingly, a companion animal is an animal not used in commercial agriculture or production, which is owned, kept, leased, possessed, or held by the petitioner or respondent or a minor child of either. So what does that mean? A lot of words. So what animals are protected? Well, obviously we know what a pet is, right? A general pet would be, our Labrador retriever in our house, our tabby cat, right? Those are easy. But what happens when it's a horse? So that would be considered a companion animal. But just because an animal, you live on a farm, just because you live on, the argument would be you have, let's say you sell cows or pigs. If there's a particular cow or there's a particular pig that you are not going to sell, but that is one that you consider to be a companion animal to you, I would 100% try to put it in there. And I would work to have that animal protected because what is the whole point of this? The whole point of this is to stop this control and power by one person over another and hurting them physically and scaring them that they're going to hurt them physically. Like it's we all should be protected from that, and we want to help our clients. If there is a particular animal that is living on your property or somewhere else that you feel that way about, and that you own, I would 100% argue that that animal would be included under here. So just because it's a farm animal, you don't want to just say, oh no, this doesn't apply, because that's not what that law says. Let's look at the emergency PFAs. This part of the law that they made is very confusing, and I am trying to figure out, we don't know what they're going to do with it. I'm also trying to figure out why they did what they did. So, and as I said before, an emergency PFA is an order that you get, it's usually, so in Allegheny County, which is where I work, every county is different. You can get a temporary PFA that lasts 10 to 7 days between 8 and 11 o'clock on weekdays that are not holidays. So anything that happens outside that time period and you need protection, they send you to the municipal courts to get an emergency PFA. So an emergency PFA can last 24 hours until, until the courts open the next day, or 4 o'clock the next day. It can last an entire weekend, but it also can last the weekend plus the Monday of President's Day or the Monday of Martin Luther King's Day. So you're talking 4 nights and 3 days. That's a long time when you are dealing with somebody who's very angry. And as we know, for our clients, the most dangerous time for them is when they are leaving the relationship. So what we want to do is, what they did with this is, generally before they changed this law, you could get an emergency PFA, and these are the only reliefs you can get. Now you can get, the temporary ones, there's more, final, there's even more. But for an emergency one, the law says that you can either get number one, which is when you tell the defendant that they are no longer to abuse the plaintiff. Okay, that would be obvious. And you could get number two, which is eviction. So a person can be evicted from the defendant can be evicted from the home if the plaintiff owns it, or they own it together, or there's minor children, there's certain support obligations, but there can be an eviction. And they can also order that there's no contact. So those were the 3 things that they can order for emergencies. They could not order custody. So custody is not part of this emergency one. But they can order those 3 things, or they can, if they're not going to grant possession because the person doesn't have a right to be in that home, or has no interest in that home, then they can grant just that they are not allowed to abuse them anymore until the next hearing for the next 24 hours, or until this one would expire, and also that they are not to contact. And no contact means no contacting them through telephone, no texting, no social media, no third person. So they can't call friends, they can't do any kind of contact. So when they modified the law and added our companion animals, they said that they can only do one, which is no abuse, and 9.1, which is what we've been talking about here, which is everything that we've talked about prior to now about how we're protecting our animals and our people. So they interestingly left out the eviction, and they left out the contact with the plaintiff. Now, I don't know why. So I think it's really interesting that they did that. I don't know if it was intentional, so I'm assuming it was. And as you may note in the law, it says or, so you can't do all of them. You can only do one of these 3 situations. Now, why I try to give it the benefit of the doubt, and I think, well, maybe they think that if the person is taking the pet with them, and they have all that pet, they're not going to be in the home. They're not going to be in the home, because if they had been in the home and had gotten eviction and the defendant had to leave, these issues wouldn't be occurring because the animal would be with you, which is not accurate, because as we said earlier, this order could last for, 4 nights and 3 days, which is a long time, especially if that victim had to put the animal somewhere else, or the animal is boarded, like if it is a horse, and doesn't live on the property. So it isn't that protection, but they may have thought, well, generally these are companion animals, they live in the house. If we protect them, if they're going to be evicted, they don't need this anyway. So I don't know, but that's what I'm wondering. And then also the no contact. Possibly they thought, well, 9.1 includes all of those things, like you can't contact the person, possessing the animal. So now maybe they thought, okay, we're giving the animal to the plaintiff. So the defendant cannot contact the person anyway, because it says in that law, they're not to contact that plaintiff, because the plaintiff is in possession of the pet. So possibly they thought those were already covered by just adding 9.1, but it is important to talk to your clients about it, because when they come in and they want to get an emergency PFA, if they want to have the person evicted, if that's their most important thing, then it's part of our safety planning. This is all part of our safety planning. So if they really want to get the person evicted, then maybe they shouldn't include the pet in it. Or is the pet really being like at this level? You can still go on, the next morning, and get the pet in the temporary one. But at this moment, what is the emergency situation? What are the priorities for their safety? That is what we want to know. But thankfully, this law now gives them an option to leave and to get away from this person, in the crisis. So now these are called indirect criminal complaints. If you're not aware of what an indirect criminal complaint is, it is what is used to enforce these protections. So in an indirect criminal complaint, is called that. If you didn't know why, an indirect criminal complaint is because a PFA is not it's in the family law. It's a quasi-civil proceeding for protection. And so that's why it's called an indirect criminal complaint. It has some criminal aspects to it, but it is enforcing a family law order. So it is basically for arrest. And what is going to be interesting is they put this in here. It is great. They violate this order that's for protecting this pet by doing any of the things that we talked about earlier. But now the question becomes about how is this going to be implemented into our police stations? When a policeman comes up, how do they know what to arrest? Yes, if that abuser comes and takes that animal and, takes it home, okay, clear sense here. We are also, we had a great advocate who had in Allegheny County who had suggested some language to help the police, really forward thinking person. And she had said, why don't we, and we're going to talk about a little bit about what it looks like in Allegheny County. I don't know what the other counties are doing. Everybody's different, but, how to help the police. And one way is, let's not just say the family dog. Let's not just say, okay, Spot is the one who's protected in this order. Instead, we want to say Spot, the yellow Labrador retriever, age 6, whatever, so that there's some way for the police to be like, okay, this is who we are. This is what I'm helping. This is what I have to do. So it's really, really important that we figure out how the police are going to be able to enforce these things. These are some of the court things that are going on now. The emergency PFAs, they're amending that and putting that online. And so this is what we had heard. So this will be helping the magistrate judges. In Allegheny County right now, they have not changed our temporary PFA forms, but there is what they're doing, and this is important for us too, for our legal advocates. Make sure we are asking these questions right when you're doing the narratives, so you can put these reasons in here why that pet should be protected. We do notes to our DROs, and they will make sure the judge knows, and they're putting in this language that I have on this slide. And then again, we're trying to figure out what is the best way to help the police identify what is going on here, putting in what kind of animal it is. And that is in one of our sections, but every county is different. So you have to check with your own county and what they're doing. So what are we going to do? What needs are going to result after we do our safety planning and they leave? This is the question. And this is where I had seen something about some comments about Red Rover, different grants to come out. They're going to need emergency housing if they did not get an eviction and they need to get out. We need to know what shelters in our area have animals. We need to know if there's a pet-friendly hotels. How are they going to pay for them? Where are they going to stay? Do they need to have that animal stay in an animal shelter? An animal boarding facility or a shelter? How much is that going to cost? Where are they going to move after? Pet-friendly housing, really important. Veterinary stipends. Those animals can't go into a boarding facility if they don't have their immunizations. We have to figure out with them who's going to pay for those. How are we going to help them? What if that animal was abused? Different things to look at. They ran out tangible funds, transportation funds. How are they going to get that animal out if they don't have a car? And how are they going to feed that animal if they are leaving this situation? Financial abuse usually accompanies any kind of physical or bodily harm. So how are they going to pay for these things? How relocation stipends to help them relocate, and pet legal services also, as when you get to the part of who owns this animal. And these are some more of the things that we offer. We were luckily granted OVC funds, one of the 5 organizations in the country in 2021, to start figuring out how are we going to help these people. And so these are just some ways. This is how we do things. Every center should have a plan. Handing out little tank cards, put them in the bathrooms. How are you referring them? How are they getting referred to us? Education is the most important thing, and that is why we are doing this here. The tank cards are they look like business cards, but they fold over. So they're just like really little ones to get information to you guys. So if someone's in the bathroom, generally, because that's some place that they might be alone where their abuser does not follow them, they can pick one up and put it in their pocket. If you only have big giant brochures or big pieces of paper, those can sometimes be noticeable, but a little tent card, a little card that they can just stick in their pocket helps them be safe. But this is really important, is the education, not only of this law, which is giving us the opportunity to talk to all of you and giving our clients a way to escape violence with their animals, to remove that barrier, but it's also important so that all of our survivors see this, and our survivors know that we are all there for them, and that there's lots of other safety planning to do that may be outside of this law, but this law is really important. There are some things on here too that are you can see there's a domestic shelters that has help of all the domestic shelters in Pennsylvania, and safe havens for the Animal Welfare Institute. It's awionline.org is an amazing resource. We get calls all the time from out of state. That actually has a map of everywhere in the country of shelters or other organizations that can help us and help our clients, even if they're not in Pennsylvania or they're not in Pittsburgh. Maybe they're in the east side of the state.
Dana,
So thank you all
much for your presentation today. I'm going to transition to Melissa so that we have enough time for Q&A at the end, but thank you for everything that you provided. So it's my pleasure now to introduce Melissa Hemming. She's an assistant supervisor for the Westmoreland County Children's Bureau. She's served in this position since 2016. Prior to this, she was an assessment caseworker for 9 years, making up her 17 years of experience with the agency. Melissa also serves on the Westmoreland County Human Trafficking Task Force and the Keystone Link Coalition. She is the president of the West Fairfield Community Center and has been a volunteer firefighter with the Fairfield Township Volunteer Fire Company since 2000. Melissa lives in Bolivar and with her husband and her 2 Great Danes, Dobby and Ollivander. Melissa, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen. If it wants to let me. Okay, so like she said, I am from the Westmoreland County Children's Bureau. I have been here for 17 years, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how this is all going to work. So first, we're going to talk about some concerns related to protective services. So we talked about a little bit about domestic violence. Now we're going to talk about emotional abuse. So pets may be used as leverage to coerce cooperation from victims. So in Pennsylvania, what's emotional abuse? So under Child Protective Services law, emotional abuse is defined as um, rendering a child chronically and severely anxious, agitated, depressed, socially withdrawn, psychotic, or in reasonable fear for that child's life or safety. It can also seriously interfere with a child's ability to accomplish age-appropriate or developmental and social tasks. So how does this tie in with a pet? You know, somebody can use that pet to affect that child in these ways, make this child anxious, depressed, socially withdrawn, worrying about that pet, worrying about what somebody's going to do to that pet. It can also be used not just for children, but to cause this for older adults via threats to pets or witnessing pet abuse. And also people involved with juvenile probation, adult probation, need to keep their eyes out for things like this and needs to make sure those things are reported. So some examples of emotional abuse. So some cases that we have had. Recently, we had a case where we had a father that was using a dog to coerce a child to come to visit. The mother had recently got custody of the child, but they were unaware that this law had just been signed into law, and left the dog with the dad. The dad would coerce the child to come and visit and then murdered the dog to punish the child for going with mom. Another case that we had was we had a child that was refusing to, a child that was in a situation with an alcoholic parent, being threatened, and the child refused to leave the home because they had nowhere to take their horse. This was prior to this law being signed in, so there was nothing that they could do, nowhere to take that horse because the father wouldn't let them take the horse and leave. So whenever you're meeting with your families, ask questions. So if you're suspecting domestic violence, in this study, in 31% of cases, a suspect had access to a gun, and in 68% of these cases, these same cases, they had access to, there was the suspected of animal abuse. So this slide is actually going to be sent to you as a handout. So make sure you're asking these questions. In all of these different situations, you know, in 47 cases, substance abuse, mental illness, you know, 74% of those same cases that were pulled, there was a history of animal abuse. So some questions that we want to use to begin that process. Whenever you're meeting with families, ask them, do you have any pets? If so, ask about those pets. Ask about any worries that you have with those pets, or what stresses do you have about those pets? And if you did not have that pet, would you leave that situation? Then you can start that conversation about getting them out of that situation, including that pet. So in talking with families about getting a protective order, make sure that the family is aware that they can include that pet on the order. Talk to the family while they're getting in preparation stages about getting the pet, and talk to them about getting that pet license put in their name and getting that vet records and all that pet's medical records changed into their name. So it'll be easier to get that pet out of that situation. And make sure they're aware of, and you can help them, be aware of what shelters that take pets or have a plan for a family member or friend or to foster that pet until the victim can take that pet back. So here are some resources that you can use to help them find a place for that pet. So there's the Humane Society website is there. Also AWI Online that Dana shared. And then here's the hotlines to call to report animal abuse, child line for child abuse, and the hotline for elder abuse. And then any questions for me specifically?
Actually, Melissa, I think what we're going to do is I've asked, while you panelists were doing a lovely job, to go ahead and put the questions into the chat. And so we're going to work our way through the chat pieces as quickly as we possibly can. But thank you so much for that. Our first question today is for Dana. Dana, the question is, if someone who petitions a person to be evaluated for mental health condition, e.g. in Pennsylvania, a 302, and the petitioner also gets a PFA because the person is not hospitalized, are the pets in the home still protected under the PFA? We tend to talk about the link in the IPV-DV world, but family violence occurs within homes due to untreated mental illness and emotional dysregulation.
Okay, so I might have to listen to that again because it was.
I know that's a long question, so
Like, wait.
I'm happy to repeat
So-
it. I'm sorry, I tried to
So
break.
yeah, so I mean, tell me if I'm right or wrong. I'm going to try to summarize. So there's mental health issues in the home. So there's animal abuse and person abuse. So we're talking about somebody who then gets the defendant of the PFA gets 302, so they're in a health facility. And then is your PFA still valid while they're in the mental health facility?
No, the question is, okay, so if someone who petitions a person to be evaluated for a mental health condition, so someone gets a 302, and the petitioner also gets a PFA, so they have both a 302 and a PFA because the person is not hospitalized, so the person is not in the hospital, are the pets in the home still protected under that PFA?
Yeah, if the pet's included in that PFA, they are still included. A 302 or a 302 or mental health, which are great and I'm not sure exactly the question, but the pets, whatever's in the order is in the order. So they are protected. Sometimes it gets confusing because you have a criminal case and you have a PFA. So sometimes, like if you're talking about a criminal case, if you're at the magistrate, sometimes, or even a trial, they'll settle the case or plea or reduce the charges or have keep it, at the lower levels, and they order certain things. And one of them is a mental health evaluation. And then sometimes they have the PFA, which is the family court, and it is confusing about like what happens, but there's no contact orders with that one. There's PFAs for this one, but there always is, whatever the order says, no matter what the state of the defendant is, the defendant, that animal and that person are protected, whether that person's in the house, in a mental health facility, or needing to come back, they are protected. And I guess you could even potentially have a protection without an eviction. I don't know if they would do an in-house order for final orders. We're going to have to sort of see how they play with this, but I know that's probably confusing, but.
So Dana, we also have the second question for you, and I think you did cover this a bit in your presentation. Since PA has a lot of very rural areas, many people have animals that could fall between livestock and companion animals. Are there any particulars as to what is considered a companion animal under this act, aside from cats and dogs?
Well, and unfortunately, like, we don't know what they're going to do, but my argument would be absolutely yes. I absolutely believe that the horses are. And just like I said, I think that even if it is an animal that is sold regularly in the course of the farm's business, but if it's a particular animal, I think it would definitely apply under here. The problem would be is that, a lot of abusers are extremely manipulative, and they may threaten to injure other animals that, in a cruel way, that are for sale. And that is something that would most likely not be under here, I would think, because I don't think those animals would apply. However, what we would do is have safety planning for that person that could be outside of here. Like, you still can get a PFA on those actions. It just might not have those protections for those particular animals, but it still could have that person evicted, have that person not be on the property. Criminal charges can always be filed for threats and harassment and stalking. So there's other opportunities. This is just one form of the safety planning, but I would say I don't want to give any abusers any ideas, but it probably would not, some of them will not be unfortunately under the statute, but a lot of them will. And I would argue that was a very special animal to my client.
Okay, and the next three questions, Dana, are also for you. I think they're relatively quick questions. Do these regulations only cover a companion animal is the first question.
Yes.
Okay, the second question is, for the purposes of this updated in Title 23, is there a definition officially listed of companion animal? Because this questioner feels that this is an important aspect of
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah, it is. It is under it's under Title 23, Domestic Relations, Part 7, which is abuse of the family, Chapter 61. Definitions are Section 6102. And the actual definition is under it is J. Or it's, well, it's under Section J. And it says companion animal. And that's what you're going to be working with. And keep in mind that it says an animal not used in commercial agriculture or production. So it has to be an animal that is not. However, that particular animal, that particular farm animal may not be for sale.
Thank you. Dana, the next question 6 is also for you. To add to this, can these laws help when an individual is seeking mental health or drug and alcohol treatment in terms of providing a safe place for their pet to be housed or cared for?
I wish it did. It doesn't. It only has to do with, and the PFA Act, that's why I stress the PFA Act is limited. It's only limited to either family members, or it's limited to people that are having like a relationship, interpersonal violence, or in your family. It can't even be like a boyfriend's like girlfriend or anything, even if it can do with some household members, sort of on the line, but it is unfortunately not. But there's other bills that are out that, if you ever wanted to get in touch with Kristen about, there was one about domestic relations. But I'll tell you, it opens doors for other organizations. For instance, Crisis Center North has partnerships with some organizations that do sheltering, they do fostering of animals. And in that organization that we work with, they also have a program for people like going in the hospital that need their animals, their small animals to have a place to stay, or in a mental health facility or an alcohol rehab. They don't have to do with domestic violence, but those organizations that we are partnering with oftentimes have programs to help people that are in mental health facilities also.
Dana, Maria asked, what is the coordination with domestic violence and animal shelters and fosters for housing for the animal? And are there any potential liability issues addressed, like pet bites, scratches, kicks, or someone gets ill or injured, etc.?
So that's a great question. And there are a lot of different kinds of organizations that are doing trainings on these. We do not have a shelter, so we don't physically take care of those animals. Those animals go to, as you said, partnerships. Those organizations that have already boarding facilities or fostering programs, our clients have to sign a consent for release for us to even, mention anything that's going on. So those are signed, and then when they have to put those animals into those programs, they sign those contracts with those programs. Those programs are used to having situations that come up that are difficult for our domestic violence victims or domestic violence centers to deal with. And it's interesting because I've had even hotels say to me, well, I don't want those people in my hotel. And I said, those people are in your hotel. I mean, basically what we're saying is that now we're here to help you with it. You're definitely going to get paid, and we're here to help you with it. So you're going to have these people anyway in your hotel, but you might not get paid, and these things happen. So another really important thing is for all your organizations are, when you're trying to plan for these people, is to have try to form partnerships and collaborations with your local humane animal rescues. A lot of times they will have a sheltering program with you, and then you don't have to pay. But it really is important because then they already are used to this. They know what happens. I mean, unfortunately, they have people that drop them off and don't pick them up. So if you don't pick your animal up at a certain time, when you drop the animal off, there's relinquishment forms. There's different things that are difficult for our clients. That's why we're here to support them. We're here to talk to them about it, have them make the decision on what they want their animal to do for their animal safety, what they can deal with, which organization works best for them, and try to help them. That's why that's just one aspect of the safety planning. It's a whole huge thing of the animals and domestic violence victims.
Thank you. And then Kristen, I think you had something that you'd like to add to this question. You're on mute, Kristen. Okay, I will move down. Maybe Kristen is not yet available. See if we have any other questions here. I'm hoping I'm not missing anyone, so I'm doing my best. There's quite a bit in the chat. Okay, the next question is, I'd like to include this information in the upcoming Humane Society Police Officer Continuing Education in May. The HSPOs are going to ask what their obligations are in the shelters where they work. Space is always an issue. I'm sorry, I'm not exactly sure what, I don't have an author on this question. I'm not sure what the question in this is. If anyone wants to unmute and clarify, that would be appreciated. Or you can contact us at a later point.
Grace, I'm here now. Grace, can
Oh,
you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, I'm having a technical problem. I did want to just make a point that the shelters will work with you as best as they can to make sure that they are able to place pets. Like Dana said, having those relationships ahead of time are so critically important, but they are there to try to find solutions to these issues. So again, that relationship ahead of time is so important. And then the second comment about the Humane Society police officer training, if you would reach out to me individually, I would love to work with you, because the new executive director of Federated Humane Societies of Pennsylvania, I think they would be very interested in that. And I think through the Department of Agriculture and their training program, that would be something that they would be very interested in. So please reach out to me separately, and we can talk through options for that.
Great. And then question 10, Dana, can a PFA be filed on behalf of a companion animal, or must there be a human plaintiff, either an adult or minor child, that is also petitioning for protection? This goes along with the earlier question this person asked regarding the language of the final order agreement section.
Yes, it has to be a PFA. The first part of the PFA talks about that this is one part of the relief section. When it talks about the first part of the law, talks about like who can get a PFA, what it's for, or who can get it, and what circumstances it can be given. And it is always about bodily injury to a human, or fear of bodily injury to the human. So that is why it's important for us really to talk to our clients to understand how this defendant or abuser's behavior is scaring them, and how they're using the animal to do that. So if they only say, okay, I'm not taking the animal, paying for the animal to go to the vet, if you can't show that that's making you think you're going to get actually physically harmed, unfortunately, the law does not recognize emotional or financial abuse as a reason to get a PFA. So there has to be a human involved that is going to either has had bodily injury then or in the past, and is in fear of bodily harm. And that fear is like a reasonable fear. Like, why do they have that fear?
Okay, just to let everyone know, we're going to be concluding in about 2 minutes. So we'll try to put as many questions in as we can in that time frame. Any questions that were answered, we'll try to get out to the panelists to get out to you, and you will be receiving an evaluation of this webinar in the mail that we hope you'll take a quick moment to fill out. The next question we have, which I think is probably the last for the day, is how will pet inclusion appear on temporary and final PFAs, similar to weapon relinquishment?
So that's we're trying to figure this out, but every county is going to be different. Only the emergency PFAs will be the same. So you have to talk to um, the office who organizes your PFAs. It could just be the family court if it's a small county. In Allegheny County, we do our temporary PFAs. They're on the computer. So they will fill out a form, and then there's a narrative and there's an order. And the words, what they're doing in Allegheny County is the words are saying plaintiff is granted temporary ownership rights over a companion animal, namely whatever the animal's name is, like Spot, and the defendant is ordered to refrain from possessing, contacting, attempting to contact, all that language, or any person sheltering the companion animal, namely, and again, the animal's name. And then one of the advocates had suggested that they put in, Spot, the golden retriever dog. So that's how the words are just the law. That's all the law words they're putting in. And some of them, they're going to make a form. It's going to be part of our form so that we're going to be required to ask, just like they have it in Allegheny County, at least for like the children. But it's going to be like a simple form. I think every county is going to be doing it differently. So, but they're just going to be putting in that language. And the question is, what we're all going to see is, what does a judge think that language means? So
Great. We have come to the conclusion of our workshop at 1:30. For those of you whose questions that I did not get to, I apologize. We will definitely put those answers in an email and get it out to participants. And additionally, please remember to take a brief moment to fill out your evaluation form. Those of you who are interested in joining the Keystone link can contact us. You can certainly use my email at gcoleman@crisiscenternorth.org. And this information will also be in the email going out to you. We thank everyone for attending today. It was wonderful to have you all here and to have this really important discussion. We hope you have a great day. Thank you.